Okay, you want Gen X's opinions. Okay, we're going to try to be short and to the point. I'm really actually a part of Generation W, but because I was born in 1966, and I was raised with a lot of Gen W values, and for reasons I don't really want to get into, somehow Gen X completely skipped over me, completely. Because my dad was in the Air Force, and I was on an Air Force base until I was about 5 or 6. And then I was in a retirement community in Colorado Springs. And so the Gen W values are work, plan, save, understand your responsibilities as a husband and a father, and understand your responsibilities as a mother and matriarch of the household, which means that you're the love and the stability for the husband and the children, because the husband is out working, making money for you, and then he brings food to the table. You cook it, you wash, you clean, you make sure the children are raised, are going to school, or you're homeschooling them, whichever you chose at that point. And as a mother, you also had your conjugal, as a wife, you had your conjugal duties, and then also the husband and wife had a partnership in how they were going to discipline the children when they did wrong. And you disciplined your children by spanking them. You tried not to use your hand whenever possible. You always used something like a strap or paddle or something like that, because mothers and fathers realized that an undisciplined child is a child who will grow up to be a spoiled brat child and will eventually get attached to the wrong groups of people. And then, even back then, there was a problem with gangs and drugs. And if you got too far south in Colorado Springs, you got into the black and Latino gangs, where drugs, prostitution, and bars, gambling, were all, a part of, southern Colorado Springs. Okay, and so now I was lucky. Okay, so I'm 58 years old, and really the only two addictions that I managed to come out with are cigarettes and coffee. I have had 2 divorces, okay, but because I missed Generation X, and also blended in with Generation Y, I grew up with basically, I don't care, and then that translated into, I don't know what my responsibilities are, and as a result, I didn't understand what education was for. And due to the problems and issues that arose around my upbringing, I didn't understand that upon leaving school, I would either need to go to college to learn a specific discipline, so that I would be able to get a good paying job, or I would leave high school and be able to get a decent job, where I could get promotions and pay raises. So I didn't understand that. Now, Generation W was okay. They planted gardens in the yards. They planted gardens, and I do remember at one time when I was 11 years old, when both of my brothers started getting in trouble with the law. I told my mom that I would maintain the garden, but I had not had any interest in gardening, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I just never went back to it. And Mom, as a single mother being divorced, was at work, and so she didn't have the time to show me. Okay, so that was part of the planning process. Eating, okay, you had a garden in the backyard, okay, and so I didn't understand gardening. I didn't understand why we needed to do it. Okay, that's Gen Y, Gen Z thinking. Okay, so at 58 years old, I'm starting to learn the principles of gardening. It's a little late, but had I understood gardening and had I been able to plant my own food, corn, bell peppers, garlic, onions, radishes, everything that you would buy at the store, I would be set up pretty good right now. Okay, I wouldn't have to go to the grocery store for those things. Potatoes. As a matter of fact, I'm going to harvest some potatoes here next week. We're going to see how those turned out. Okay, but like I said, 58, I'm sorry it's a little late to start learning how to garden and farm. And that is a skill that is necessary for survival. Also, storage pantries. So when you have storage pantries, then you took, oftentimes, you would have your garden, okay, but you also had the convenience of going to the grocery store. Okay, so when stuff was out of season, you could go to the grocery store and you could get canned food, and then you could put that in the pantry and save it until save it for a rainy day. In other words, save it for an emergency, so that you could have access to it, so that you would not be hurting. You wouldn't be running to the store and grabbing 3 months of stuff off the shelf and bringing it home and emptying out the grocery store with everybody else. It kept you from being in emergency mode. You're set up. There's no reason for you to be in a hurry. Okay, so the idea was to get competent in an area of expertise, and that's your learning years between 8 and 18. Okay, get a job, garden, plan, and prepare for an emergency. Okay. Okay, now here's some other things, and this is another reason why I want to put my 2 cents in as a Gen Xer. Generation W also had contingency plans. Okay, so the contingency plans means that you had money in the bank. All right, so you would save money, and usually it would be anywhere from 10 to 15% of your salary that would go into the bank, and you do not touch that. Okay, that's Generation W. And the idea is to have enough money in the bank so that you would be able to survive for 3 months in an emergency, and you would be able to either walk down or drive down to the bank and get money when you needed it, so that you could make purchases, or you could write checks on it, and make purchases on your savings. And And so they always had, the Generation W always had a 3 to 6 months um, fallback fund, okay, in case of emergencies. Also, there was consideration in purchasing homes that for heating in the winter, the fireplaces would be would be would be tied to the heating vents. So if your furnace went out, then you could start a fire and warm your house with a fire, okay, which usually meant that you had to have a storage of logs sitting out in the backyard. You didn't put them inside because, they gather bugs and spiders and all that kind of stuff, So you had to have logs that you put in the backyard that you purchased, okay? And so you would always have heating. And then, for air conditioning, you had fans in the windows, okay, when it got hot, okay. Right, or you went and bought an air conditioning unit, and there were some times where you could buy a battery operated air conditioning unit, and you'd be able to run it from there, in your room to keep cool, so, contingency plans. Also, in the event of an emergency, like a tornado or a bad hailstorm or something like that, you would be able to, take your family to a motel or a hotel for safety. And then, so that pretty much, where you're going. And then also, if for some reason something didn't work out, okay, and you ended up losing your job or you needed to move, okay, there was money set aside specifically for moving from one city to another. And you sold your house or you rented it out and you bought another one or lived in an apartment in another city so you could buy another house when the other one was sold. Another thing that Gen W always thought about was owning a house on a parcel of land, okay, because your true freedom is in ownership of your own house when you are in control of your own activities and you handle the affairs of your family inside your own home apart from other people. My mother had always said that her house was her income. Everywhere she moved from Danville, Pennsylvania to Colorado Springs, bought a house. She moved from one part of Colorado Springs to another part of Colorado Springs, bought a house. She moved from Colorado Springs to Phoenix, Arizona, attempted to buy a house, ended up in a condominium, okay, that she was able to sell for a return. And then she came here to Oklahoma and bought a house, okay, and she put down a $40,000 down payment on it, and it left her with a $30,000 mortgage on which she only had $250 a month to pay on. Her house was her freedom. It was also her income. Her house was her living, okay. So Gen Y and Gen Z have totally forsaken, planning altogether. They have forsaken savings. They don't plant gardens, and they take for granted that there's a grocery store. And many of the Gen Yers and Gen Zers, the girls, are deciding that they're going to get pregnant at the age of 17. They're not going to get married, and they're just going to live on welfare. And then when the man comes calling who got her pregnant, then she's got to support him with the welfare. And so that is a lack of planning, and there's not choosing a good spouse, and that is choosing a horrible road for the rest of your life as a single mom. It has bad connotations, gives you a bad reputation, and other men think that you're easy because, well, you're 19, you got a 3-year-old kid, you made a mistake, that makes you easy, right? And so you're a target, which also makes your kids a target. Okay, so you don't think about those things. All right? And then men, okay, the boys, when they become men at 18, and I put men in quotes, they don't have any idea what school is for either. By the age of 17, they're running around like a bunch of old men, rounded shoulders, weighted, pressured, depressed, ready to commit suicide. They've lost all hope, and they're addicted to drugs, right? So they have no idea what they were going to school for either. They had no idea that they needed to graduate and get a good job, okay, and start making money and start doing well for their employers. So you get promotions, and so you get raises, and so on and so forth. They didn't plan their life. They didn't learn how to fight, okay? They didn't take the time between 8 and 17, 8 and 18, between the time they started school and the time they graduated, to gain a specific kind of expertise in something, okay? So they failed to plan. And again, the men, they don't have a savings, so they don't have a rainy day fund. And so they get out of high school, and guess what? They can't get a job. And so they've got either one of three things that they do, okay? One is join the military, and hopefully they'll get the discipline that they need. They'll have an income, and they don't have to beg people to put them up, and so on and so forth. One, okay, that's one, okay. Or two, they live at home in a garage or in a basement of their parents' house, and they just pine away, okay. They may be addicted to drugs. They may be, like sneaking out of the house at night and playing on the town and stuff like that. Getting drugs and hooking up with women and so on and so forth, and end up getting somebody pregnant, and they end up maybe going to jail for crimes that they've committed, whether it be rape, selling drugs to a minor, getting in a fight because they were drunk, whatever it may be, running with the gangs, okay. Or three, they find a girl that they get to fall in love with them, and then she's hooked on him, and now she becomes mama, right? And so now he's living off of her like he would have lived off of his mom, okay? In other words, he went out and found a surrogate mother so that he could basically move out of mom and dad's house, move into her house, and do everything that he was doing at his mom and dad's house, okay? No planning, no job, no savings, and no will to get any skills under his belt. So he can't, he's not qualified to go to college, and he doesn't have the money to go to trade school, and his parents either already spent the money on him and they don't have it anymore, or he's got to come up with it himself. And since getting a job is nearly impossible, he's not going to have the money to do that. Okay, so he's just going to be skating along, sponging off of his girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? God forbid he has kids, because those kids, the boys in particular, are gonna follow his example. But when they get to be teenagers, they need a strong man to get them in line. And if they don't have a strong man to get them in line, who's left? The mother. She's got no power. So those sons are going to end up being as worthless as the father. Okay? Bad. Okay, and that's why we're at Gen Y, Gen Z. Now, another thing that you guys are doing, all right, and I'm going to try to wrap this up with this right here. You have put all of your stock in high tech, in technology. I've spoken to people who want a Star Wars kind of technology, where you go to a planet and there are high-rise buildings, highly technological computers that do all the work for you, robots, and ultra clean environments, where you don't have to go out and like work in the earth. Your food is made for you out of like a processor, and that whole lifestyle is the lifestyle of being inside, and you're working with high tech, you're software engineers, and you're building infrastructure for programming to network with anybody whom you want to network, and you control money, and you govern, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, and here's what I'm talking about. You're planning to destroy all the previous foundation which brought us to this point, which means you want to get rid of farming, you want to get rid of the cattle, you want to get rid of chickens, you want to get rid of anything that you consider to be dirty. You want to replace it with solar panels, basically, which means you will destroy the dirt that you would need to farm in. Okay, and so that's going to be worthless. You want to put up wind farms. The wind farms are already causing a lot of problems with the birds that are flying into them. Okay, and then you're actually programming satellites, thousands of satellites, to go all over the earth to create a seamless network without latency, so that you could connect from Colorado to China, or so that you could set up, so that you can set something up where you can have video sex or something, from Texas to somebody in England, or something like that. And again, you're going to build everything so that computers run it, and your spaceships, you're going to rely heavily on your spaceships, and you're not going to have very much knowledge on how to fly these things. They're going to be automatic. They're going to be automated. Somebody who has flown a plane, somebody who understands the aerodynamics, and somebody who's done the math has already programmed that into the software, so that basically all somebody has to do is jump in the seat, press a few buttons, and they're flying. They wouldn't have to know how to fly the plane. And that is a big problem. okay? Because what are you going to do without a computer? What are you going to do without the symmetry? You've got to be able to fly the plane without that stuff. You're not going to be able to do it, okay? So now, what happens when, and I do mean when, the grid for the network is gone, when the solar panels are destroyed, when the satellites come down, and you have no Earth, basically, because it's going to take 3 to 5 years to rejuvenate it and make it new again, so that you can plant in it. And you're going to have to learn how to hunt and fish and survive. And you're going to have to learn how to stay away from poisons which are in the forest, natural poisons which are in the forest, like poison ivy, berries, stuff that you shouldn't eat, lions, tigers, and bears, and so on and so forth. And then you're going to have to learn how to build from scratch, which none of you know how to do. Okay? You can't just turn on a computer program or throw out a 3D printer to build a foundation to build a concrete house for you. You're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to do it on your own. And guess what? You're not going to have the internet. You're not going to have the YouTube. So what are you going to do? You're trying to build this entire infrastructure off of high tech, and then you're trying to replace operators who are supposed to be on the phones with customer service with quote-unquote help screens, so that you can ask a question and hopefully get your question answered, which almost never happens. You have to talk to an operator, and you don't have any available. And then you want to make more money, and so what you do is you hire employees, and you drive them into the ground. They get tired after a year or two because you've overworked them. They've got to leave and go somewhere else. And then you hire somebody else and tire them out too. And it's causing a lot of stress in your companies. And then you wonder why you go bankrupt, because you ain't got nobody to work for you. There's no computer program for that. So like I said, you don't have a plan B. You don't have a contingency plan. You can't farm. You can't raise cattle. You can't ride a horse. You can't build even so much as a wagon. You don't know how to fix a car. You don't know how to repair a house. And you don't have any money to hire somebody else. So this is a Gen W blended into Gen Y that Gen X skipped, telling you why, giving you my 2 cents because you're asking for it. You guys, take a lesson from me. I'm 58 years old. Like I said, I don't have the skills necessary for survival. I depended on the military for 13 years of my life. And then I got disability. I worked as a taxi driver, but then my car broke down. Well, and so if I didn't have disability, if I didn't have disability, and I didn't have enough foresight to buy a house, okay, I would be in a world of hurt. And most of you are living in apartments, okay, and some of you are slicking off of somebody else. They're working and they're keeping the apartment, and you're just riding on their coattails, okay? So you've got no plans whatsoever, much less do you have a contingency plan. You don't have a plan B. that's one way to summarize this, okay? And or you're trying to depend on high tech and you're building high tech, and then you're not considering if that high tech infrastructure gets destroyed and you don't have anything to fall back on. Okay, so this is my Gen X input. And none of my stuff is copyrighted. I'm not on some fancy show or something like that, you know. And so if you guys see anything in here that is worth your time and you want to use it, I don't really care. Okay, it's you know, so, and this is being published on the Commons, and so there is no copyright in a Commons area. Okay, and so you can use any portion of it or all of it if you want to. All I ask is that you try to keep my words as original as possible so that you're not putting words in my mouth. Thank you very much.